You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Hey, gosh, it's been almost a month now, or maybe even a little bit more than a month. Hi, this is Mike Balzer. This is All Things 3D and another episode of 3D Tech Closet. And obviously, today, if you followed my description within the YouTube channel, you'll know that we're going to be discussing mixed reality on on a mobile platform. And so we have not only some software to look at today, but also a lot of different headsets that are available currently, both for iOS and Android. And plus, we're going to look at, even though I don't have one with me, but I think the pivotal device, which is the Microsoft Hololens. And then we're going to kind of talk about what mixed reality is, at least from my perspective. The term mixed reality has been distorted even by Microsoft themselves. So, on that note, let's kind of jump right into the first item. And that's Microsoft themselves. This is the Microsoft HoloLens. And I'm not going to go through much of the videos. Many of you are already familiar with it. And if you remember, one of the things that, if you followed my show, is the problem I've had with the mixed reality headset is one, it's pretty expensive, and two, it is a fully contained unit, which I guess has its benefits. That the fact that you just put it on your head and you can immediately go to town with it. But there's also been some disadvantages, and we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit. One, as you can see here, um, there are, I don't even know if we should call them projectors, but essentially they project a left and right image onto a, what would you call it, almost semi-hemispherical, semi-mirrored lens, as you can see here. And that allows the object that normally you would see, let's say if you were using AR Core, AR Kit, to be shown in front of you. The problem with this, and as we're finding out with Magic Leap and other sources, is that you have a very narrow range. And frankly, the reason for that is we're still not at a point where we can take and expand even in VR past our peripherals. So to imagine what we can do in AR, which is essentially project onto a mirrored or a semi-mirrored surface what we're seeing in these projectors. So until we actually have the technology to push them directly into our eyes, we're always going to have a limited FOV. The problem in AR is that acts like a window, and because there's nothing else surrounding it, you literally cut off the bottoms and tops. So one of the things that I remembered in my testing of this unit is that even though it seemed to track very, very well, it did not actually, in my opinion, have the best image. And I think part of that was because they were using low polygon, low texture objects. And some of those examples you can see in the mixed reality environment for Windows, if you've got one of their mixed reality headsets, which in reality is just a VR headset. But I think that's part of the problem. And the reason they've gone with that direction is that this has a lower quality processor. If you remember when they talked about it, this is nothing more than, you remember those tablets that came out and those netbooks. Well, essentially, it was that kind of CPU GPU combination that's powering this. One of the noteworthy things is that all the actual tracking part of it is in a separate component. So that isn't being done by the CPU, but regardless, it's still made it very difficult to have any very elaborate models and so forth. But it did keep the unit compact and obviously all in one unit. Even the Magic Leap has gone to multiple units, and it still, I guess, has a narrow FOV. Now, maybe the quality be better, and as well as the possibility of having the ability to actually show depth information, which is not available in this. So, as you know, this has been out for a while. Programming this, it's kind of neat. If you're already familiar with the mixed reality for Unity for their VR system, you can also immediately go in and use the HoloLens functionality. It's not difficult to go from one platform to the other. The downside is if you're an Unreal developer, uh, they even though there is a forked version of the Unreal Engine, it is Microsoft that is putting the effort in order to make it compatible. They're not. I don't know if they're getting some help or not from Epic, but the fact is, it is not unlike the Unity. Excuse me, not yes, the Unity, where Unity has incorporated the features of the HoloLens and the mixed reality systems either through a package or directly into the system, as we're going to see in a little bit. That is not the case with Unreal. And in fact, there is not even really a plugin. Well, maybe I'll take that back. I think there might be more of a plugin for HoloLens. Maybe it's the mixed reality VR portion that I'm confusing it with. Well, regardless, so let's call this kind of like the father of mixed reality. They started it. And again, my definition of mixed reality is where you combine augmented reality with the real world along with tracking. So the objects appear in front of you, but you can move around them, move towards them, move away from them, and they stay locked into place. And that is one of the great merits of the HoloLens system. As you know, if you've been using AR Kit or AR Core, some of the examples that they now have available to download, you're doing kind of the same thing, but with only a single camera and no real depth information per se. You're essentially doing plane detection. Now we can do both horizontal and vertical, both an AR kit as well as, big surprise, AR Core also has that capability. In fact, they promote the fact that not only can you do vertical and horizontal, but basically any angle. We'll see. I have not tested that yet. But if that's the case, you can then plant objects or anchor objects in a particular location and then move around them, but it's only with your phone. But we're going to see how we can take some options. If you remember, I've covered occipital on a number of occasions, and we're going to take a look at that as our first item of how we can marry this mixed reality, which means showing the outside world and augmented objects and track them, and their solution. And it's a solution for a couple of other companies, as well as my own homemade solution that I will show you with my NEODiVR stealth headset. But let's go ahead and look at the bridge now. Bridge is, I was about to say Microsoft, Occipital's solution to mixed reality. And essentially, they combine their structure sensor, and we've talked about it before. It is essentially very similar to the Connect technology, the first version of the Connect, that emits a laser pattern and then it has an infrared camera, which between the two, as well as using the RGB camera, they're able to determine depth information. More importantly, they can actually create a very crude model, and we'll show an example later on. But if you're familiar with the structure sensor scanning ability, it's not well defined. It kind of looks like clay or somebody put a sheet over an object. So there's not a lot of definition there. But from a depth perception perspective or object detection, it's more than adequate because that allows you to see like a chair, table, walls in a 3D space, and then allow you to occlude or determine planes from that. So you could actually bounce objects off of a an object in the real world, which has been then mapped to a AR version or vice versa. And I've talked about this and showed demos of it previously, but one of the cool things is the price has gone down. In fact, $100 if you already own a structure sensor, and $399, which is almost the same price as the structure sensor in the past all by itself. So now $399 gets you a headset and the sensor, or if you have one already, $179. Hopefully they'll drop it a little bit more. And we are actually going to take a look at this one too. In fact, let's go ahead and do that right now. I'll jump back to, let's see, maybe I'll go to this camera here and move these out of the way. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump to the camera. Okay, so this is it here. I don't know why I've got, I guess that's because of the chroma keying on this. Let's see if I can turn that off and, oh, no, that's actually going to be me, my color. So let's see if I can adjust that a little bit. There we go. Okay, how do I look? Still look good. Okay, so as you can see, this is the headset here. It's fairly compact. It is a little hefty once you put the sensor on it, and I don't even have the phone in it. Now, this is the new version that also supports their latest iPhone 10. And that's super cool because with the iPhone 10, with its higher resolution screen, also the fact is they use nice, I think these are Pima lenses. I don't know if they're aspheric or not, but they are still nice. They're about as, in fact, they're almost identical to the lenses that are used in the previous Google Daydream headset. But the other cool thing is that you basically clip the phone in here, and then you clap it into place, and essentially you hook up a cable, which I have right here. Right here, and then you plug it into the side, and then it goes right off to here. And I don't tell you what, I have the iPhone 6, which is, as you can see here, is smaller, but it'll give you an idea. And then you plug this into here, and then you close it, and then it stays in place. And the reason why you have to connect it is the structure sensor provides information to the sensor itself. Um, but there is a battery built into this, unlike the some of the other sensors that are out there. So it doesn't actually suck battery or deplete the battery in the actual iOS device that you have it hooked up to. So it's fairly easy. In fact, you can actually keep this attached now that I've unplugged it, and to open up the door, which allows you to get to the screen, to turn it on, and so forth. Now, even though the process is pretty simple, and let me go ahead and put my password in. I'll show you here, I'll bring it up, the bridge demo, which may or may not work because I didn't calibrate with this device. So let's see what happens. Now, I do have the previous version, so I could actually use in that, but I wanted to show some of the differences with it. Okay, so I'm going to skip this because I have a headset. And then I guess I can turn on the control, but I'm not going to go through that process, and my camera's a little blown out here. But essentially, you have a controller, and it's very similar. It's very similar, as you can see here, to what you would get with the Daydream headset. It is a 3 degrees of freedom controller. It's what's funny is that I think a number of developers who are creating mixed reality type environments, as well as clone Daydream headsets, including myself, have gone to a particular OEM who seems to be making this particular type. In fact, I would not be surprised if it is High Pivot. As you can see, they're almost identical. The only difference is there's an extra switch on the back, which is not available on this. Otherwise, the cases look almost identical. And the High Pivot here was cool because it was one of the first Daydream compatible. But in saying that, this is the occipital hand control. It's 3 degrees of freedom. So it allows you to use the bridge headset. And again, I'll just drop that in here. And then basically bring 3D augmented objects into the real world by essentially creating a stereo image. And they have a unique what do you want to call it, algorithm to give three-dimensionality even to the stereo paired image that's put in front of you from a single camera. But then it allows objects to be placed in the world. In fact, this little Bridget demo has a little robot, and you can move it around, and that particular robot will go around objects in the real world because you've already mapped it out. So there's somewhat of a lengthy process to do that. And because, if you may have noticed, there is a wide angle lens. Let me bring that up here. There you can see it. There's a wide angle lens here that fits over the RGB camera in the on the iPhone itself. And in this case, it would be for the iPhone 10. But because of that, you have to do a special calibration. And I found the calibration, even though it can be done, I found it a little difficult to do. It took a little bit of time for it to actually be done. So it's not, I don't want to use the word intuitive. There is a process that has to occur. So it's not something that you can just throw on your head and immediately move forward with it and utilize it. You have to do a full calibration. So that's kind of the only stumbling block. But once you've done that, and if you do have, again, an iOS 6, 7, 8, or even an iPhone 10, if you get the right headset, you can create some very interesting HoloLens like experiences by using a the actual smartphone. But again, remember, you still have to spend $399 for the headset. And it is somewhat heavy, even though they do have a weight in the back to counteract it, as you can see here. And it does have a ratchet, actually it doesn't ratchet, but like some of the other newer headsets, so that it fits tightly, and then a band above it. So it's a really nice design. I know the actual designer of it, John, and he did a great job on it. And the fact is, it can now be used with an iPhone 10 should give you, and I'll be finding this out soon, a very nice experience, because you no longer have to deal with the lower quality resolution of the iPhone 6, 7, or 8. You now have basically OLED capability or quality with high resolution. One thing I did do very quickly to modify this, my sensors, I removed the base of it and I put a magnetic, that's hence why they're called NEODiVR mounts, basically rare earth magnets on the bottom. And I basically redesigned their plate, changed it out. And then all I have to do is put a steel plate or a thin metal plate or band. Let's see if I can show it here. Inside here, here, let's do the trying to. There you go. And that allows me. Oh, there's something on there. And that allows me to place this on very quickly. So if you're using with an iPad or another case design, you can immediately go from this to a scanning device very quickly. So I don't actually sell it anymore per se, but you can go out to uh, where do I have it at? I can't think of it now, but essentially you can get the models, and if you send me an email, I could send you the STL files so you can make your own. But there you go. Uh, so essentially, that's the design. And later on, we're actually going to look at the mirror, which we're going to do right now. The mirror is kind of interesting. So let's jump to their website. And we've talked about this already. The mirror is essentially a very slim headset that you put in. And sadly, again, it's kind of confined to iOS at this point, even though their developer kit seems to work with iOS and Android. But I think it's more because of the open source, what do you want to call it, plugins that they're using that allow that. But the headset itself is compact, but only supports an iOS device. And in fact, I still don't even think it's available. I think they had them available for developers, but now you can pre-order it and get it. I don't know when they'll have them available. I'm assuming sometime this year. There is some thoughts that they're going to be offering some unique changes that will do more than just they're called marker-based tracking. They may go to markerless tracking. And if you've seen any of my previous episodes, which I'll show you in my version, I've actually taken Occipital's latest, what do you call it, scanning tracking device, which is their core, and created a version that has it installed on it. Sadly, there is no uh, plugins yet or SDK for me to put it into action. But essentially, what it would do is give you a very low cost HoloLens equivalent. Remember, HoloLens is about $3,000, $3,500 for about $99, I think, for this unit. And the core, which I still don't know how much that will cost, but let's say $200 to $300, about $500, you should be able. Not obviously does not include the phone, but you should be for under 1,000 be able to provide a fairly high quality, um, decent FOV tracking system. So let's kind of take a look at that. Here's some more images of it. You could sign up as a developer. I don't know if developer kits are still available. If you pre-order, let's see what comes up. Yeah, it says sold out. Notify me when available. So they don't even have any if you wanted to get one. So I don't know how many were actually created. So let's take a look at it. Find it. It is. So let's jump back to my second camera. There you go. So here it is. Now, again, I have created a special mount. This is the first prototype. It needs a little bit of redesign. But essentially, the core sensor sits on top of it, like I have here. This was for an additional battery that should be, when this finally gets released, the battery should be contained in this. Right now, I have it external, but that allows this to be like the structure sensor to be driven by battery without depleting it. As you can see here, this is powered by USB-C, so you would need a USB-C to Lightning to use it with an iPhone 6, and which I have. Well, let me go pull it out of the unit. What did I do? Too many hits. Okay. All right, so this, it's going to be a little more, it actually, if I didn't have this bracket on it, as you can see here, for the core sensor, it's actually really easy to put in, and let's see if I can show it here. You just essentially slip it in here and then push it up in there, and it's going to be a little more difficult for me because my my bracket doesn't give a lot of room, but I should be able to push it in. There we go. And so that's it. And it uses an elastic material here, as you can see, and you push it up in there, and that's what gives it the tension in order to keep it in place. But as mentioned, this is specifically made for the iPhone 6, 6S, 7, or 8. And then what it does is it projects from the screen. And I think I still have the demo, so let's see if I can bring it up. There we go. Let's see. Here it is. And like the occipital, here's the mirror hand controller. Notice it's identical except it's black. So I'm going to bring in the demo, open the app. Now, if you notice, there's something, if you looked at the images, that's missing, and that is the what do you want to call it? The mirrored lens, and it's actually semi-mirrored, and there they show it. Please insert your phone, which I have done. And there we go. So as you can see, what it does is it creates a stereo pair. Let me bring it down. And using the 3 degrees of um, motion within the gyro, and you can move your head around and see it, but it just disappeared on me. There it is. So it's essentially text. Oop, sorry. Here we go. And then it shows you to turn on your mirror. Okay. And we are there. So we're activated. We're hooked up. All right. So let me get the mirror. And it comes in a nice, I mean, they did a good job. It comes in a nice hard case, which I'll show you here. So you basically can put it in this, and then it comes with a nice little uh, synthetic cloth, similar to what you use to clean lenses, to keep it from scratching, except because I'm clumsy, I have already scratched mine. Actually, my cat knocked it down, so and with my luck, it hit another surface that was somewhat pointed, and I know you probably can't see it here, but there is a little scratch. Actually, you can see it right there. So with that being said, it doesn't affect it too much. They have, I can order another one, and they're kind of busy right now, so I don't have it yet. But it, it's a really nice design. Essentially, there's a little two magnets on the sides here. It's a little plastic, fits into two dimples on the unit itself, holds it into place. So it's fairly easy to get it up and running. And then, as I've shown in the past, if you remember, you just put it on, and there's a little unit in the back, and I'm ready. And essentially, because it uses tracking, um, you don't necessarily, it's kind of like the HoloLens, even though you have a confined area, you can move your head around and still see other objects. Now, one thing I have noticed. Okay, let's see if we're back. All right, we should be back. Apologize, I had a crash because I decided to hold off on an update on vMix, which is my streaming software, because it took so long to get started. In fact, obviously, I missed the boat for some of you who wanted to see this because I have nobody viewing it at this time. Oh well. All right, so back to the devices, and that's interesting. The oh, okay, so I have to adjust that again. Hang on a second. Okay, okay, that should be good. I'll save it. Okay, so you can see my head here, and I'll go back to my main camera so you can see what I see. So essentially, what it does is it projects the screen, which is at, I'm assuming, maximum brightness. So keep that in mind. You're pushing your screen at maximum brightness. The processor is probably working overtime to handle the objects that you see. And due to this, I don't think your batteries would last very long. However, they do make the side Lightning port accessible, so you could run an additional battery until you actually use the core sensor with it or some other sensor. Um, I'm hoping we move forward with the core sensor, then you may have some issues with battery depletion. But so you can run an additional battery. So as I was saying before my machine crashed, the objects, at least in their demo, and you can probably see that. I look up a little bit, see how there's a solar system. And yes, they do appear right in front of you and they appear solid, but they're fluorescent. So they're not very natural. But that I think is more about the demo. But also because they're using fluorescent like colors, they're probably trying to get the maximum brilliance that they can out of an object. So they appear solid in regular light. I've noticed with some of my own examples that has not worked out as well. But I think for most things it should. And this particular version only needs the little controller. There we go. Press the menu button there. And notice it's going through a little tutorial for me, and I press the home button. And there is audio that should come on, but I don't think I have it triggered. So I can press the trigger and it gives me a little, yay, I did a great job. And press the thumb pad. So you go through this, okay, and then you can use it, point the controller. And it's kind of cool because, and even though I don't see it, it's not working. Okay, so I'll press the home. There we go. There, you can, well, you can't really see it. If you look up in there, see it, but I can see it and it does appear solid. So for about less than $100, if you've already got an iPhone, again, 6, 7, 8, they've told me they're working on an iPhone 10 version, which I think would be great because that would provide even better quality. Also, I had an HTC, an older phone with a 2560 by 1440 screen, and quality is markedly different using a higher resolution screen. Plus, I'm going to be showing you a sneak peek at something I have been working on. But it does seem to work really well. It's lightweight and compact. Um, Really exciting for $100. It's sad that they don't have more available, but you can probably find that out for yourself. So let me jump back to their website. So yeah, I'd go out there, pre-order it. I think it's well worth it. And in fact, I will keep us or keep you in the loop if you're interested knowing more about where we're going with the core sensor. But essentially, we'll be able to provide bridge uh, software in an, as I call it, mirror projected system, and so this would be really, really, in my opinion, a cool environment. You could create 3D objects that could be anchored to the ground. You would see them. So unlike the core system where you have to, or excuse me, the bridge system where you have to build your models, place them in it, as well as map out the environment, which all has to be handled on the screen. All you have to do with an AR projected system is just put out the objects. So I think that would be pretty cool. And hopefully, probably I'm saying 1, 2, 3 months, we should be able to have something on iOS that provides something very similar to what you can get with a HoloLens. So I'm really, really excited about that. And I will talk a little bit more about that in a little bit when I get into the bridge demo with Unity. Okay, I'm going to put this down. Okay, so let's see where we're at now. Oh, so if you want to talk about positional tracking, and let's try to jump into the next unit. So I finally got my hands onto this, and as you can see there, it says order it now for $289, which is a little expensive. In fact, I thought it was only selling for 100. I was able to get one for about $100. So on eBay. So they've actually moved up the price. And I'd have to say it works as advertised, but there's some caveats. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it back up. And the main thing, just like the mixed reality bridge system from Occipital, I found this unit to be pretty heavy. Okay, so let me clear some space so we can see it. And here we go. All right, so there you go. Essentially, like the mirror prism, this is a semi-mirrored screen. I don't. This plastic here doesn't really serve a purpose other than to protect the cameras. We're going to get in a minute what those cameras are for, and probably the lenses. But it also adds to the weight. The other thing is this is a very, in my opinion, very heavy uh, frame, and I don't really like the way. I really like the way the Mirror Prism set this up, but you have like a cartridge that you have to pull out and put your phone in. And we're going to actually test this with, and frankly, it worked almost flawlessly. Now, again, it's probably because I didn't buy this as soon as it came out, but I will go ahead and put in my, geez, I have it in the wrong direction. Okay, and I'll have to turn it on. So let me do that. Come on. Okay. So there's you can download it for free, but it won't do anything because it needs the unit. So I've turned it on. Immediately comes up with Disney. In fact, let's see if I can do this. Give me a moment. I'm going to try something. Oh, it's got some updates to download. So you can see the screen. So overall, it I wouldn't say it's a struggle, but it's not just throw it in there and it works. Let me close that. I'm going to try something. I don't know if it'll work. If it does, cool. If it doesn't, oh well, we'll just keep moving on. Let's see where it's at. Hmm, okay. All right, so we're going to cast it, and let's see if I can bring in another stream. So give me a moment. Okay, so what streams do I have? 4. Okay, I think it's camera 3. We'll find out here in a moment. Good, I have it. Okay, so here we go. So you can see, let's go back to it and let's see if it works. Yay. All right, so I can swipe to my left, adjust your volume. We'll go ahead and put it up. I don't know if you can hear it. Okay, enable Bluetooth on your phone. I did. So the other thing that comes with it is kind of cool is this. It's a Jedi. I don't know. You know what it is. I don't. It's funny. I actually should know what it is. Oh, there's a switch in the back. Turn it on. And then the light turns on. Notice it's blue. So I believe there's a 3 DOF controller built in, meaning there's a gyro. But I also think the blue light is important because we'll find out what those cameras are for in the front of the unit. But it allows it to track. There's a few buttons on it. So let's get back to the unit itself. Turn on the lightsaber. It should glow white. No, mine glows. So it's not glowing white. So let's see why. So of course it doesn't work for me. Okay. Okay, so it says so it was already set up. So it's synced, ready to go. So we can swipe again. Calibrate the lightsaber. You do this kind of motion with it. Okay, says it's calibrated. Cool. So move on, place the beacon, which you can't see, but I've already put it on the floor. So essentially what this does is it allows the cameras to track a colored light. It's very similar, I would think, to the Sony light system that allows it to do positional tracking. Okay, so it's done. Now we can connect the headset, but we need to remove your phone from its case, find the correct head. So essentially I'm going to do this a little differently, but they want you to hook it up. So you find it and hook it up like that. And then move over, open your headset, pull this out, and then I guess you put it in. But I don't know if you're looking at this. You can see it in the bottom right hand. So there's a side with a slot, and that's where your screen has to be visible. So you put it in like this. Oh, wrong way. Like that. Okay. See, look what happened. Let's see, if I wasn't so clumsy and could prevent myself from hitting the screen, there, I wouldn't have so much of a problem. Okay, so there we go. It's in. Now open the tray. We've done that. Hold on before you. Okay, so let's put it inside of it. So what you do is you just slide it in like this. Whoops, put it in the wrong way. Again, you want to make sure that your screen is facing down into the mirrors. Boom. And then you just place the cable, which you can't see here, like that. And it is ready, I think. Okay. So I've already done that. So I don't know. See, once you put it in here, and this kind of sucks, you're kind of stuck. It doesn't seem to work. And as you remember, I mentioned the headset is heavy. All right, so let's see if I push a button. I don't think I'll be able to get any further. So I'm going to have to pull it out again. So without having access to the screen, it's kind of a pain. So I'm going to pull it out. Okay. Okay, so it wants me to do it outside the case. So it's a little bit of work. Well, trust me, I did get this up and running. So I do not know what the problem is now. But the cool thing is that it does fit pretty well with the Pixel XL or the Pixel 2 XL, which is one of the taller phones. Okay, but still no change, as you can see. Oh well, I don't want to waste any more time. It'll take a little bit of time. Like they said, and it may be because I'm now on the latest version of uh, what is it? Google Oreo, and that may be the problem since I have elected to beta test with that phone. But once it's up and running, it does seem to work well. But I've noticed the view area is fairly narrow, very similar to the HoloLens, but the objects do appear in front of you. But I noticed that it weighs a lot right here on my cheeks because you have the phone in here. The actual headset is still heavy. I don't know if this is supposed to look like some type of Star Wars helmet. I don't know what their idea is, but you may be able to see. Let me go to my other camera. Uh, there we go. You may be able to see the two cameras here. And so this is like what you're seeing in the mixed reality headset from Microsoft. They're stereo video slam cameras. It's something that Ocipol is working on, as well as a few others that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later. But this is what allows it when you have the colored light markers, like what's on the front of the lightsaber here, as well as the orb, which you can't see, but I have it on the floor. Actually, let me pick it up. Okay. Put that back up. Okay. So here is you can choose the color. I've chosen pink, but I think it also turns to blue. And I think what it does is it differentiates between the color for your lightsaber and this device, um, but it allows it to be tracked. I did find the tracking, and again, I don't know if it was my phone. It didn't seem very steady. Now, if you've ever tried a HoloLens, don't expect HoloLens quality out of this. But it did seem to work. And again, it may be because I had a lot of other objects in my room and basically a lot of clutter. And that may have been part of the problem. But it did come up, the object, you could walk around, and I was able to, do a little bit of sword play, look at the chess game up close. So it does provide positional tracking. Again, it is very heavy, very, not very ergonomically designed. And I don't see that you would have this on your head that often. I also felt that there's a narrow slit. I like the more open experience with the Mirror Prism. Now, if they can figure out a way and work with Occipital and myself to come up with positional tracking, I think they've got a winner there. The fact that this is $300, and that's not including the phone, is a difference. Positives with this thing: you have a case that can adapt to both iOS as well as Android phones. And with Android, it can be micro USB or USB-C. It provides both cables for that. But I did notice they're only using a micro USB connector on the headset. And I've noticed since this one was used that it's not really solid. So I have a feeling it's probably going to fail before anything else does. But it does allow it to be used with multiple devices, kind of similar to the Gear VR with their own Galaxy series, but that you're not limited on the Lenovo headset. The other detractor at this point, which may not be in the future, is that there is no developer kit. So your only content is going to be what's available from them, which is obviously the Star Wars stuff. And there may be other things coming out. I sure hope so, because I can imagine kids getting bored with this. Also, this thing is not made for a child's head. It's fairly bulky, fits mine fairly well, but this is made probably for teenagers more than for kids. So, or obviously avid adults who are big Star Wars nuts. And you do have some adjustments here. I probably could adjust mine a little tighter, but because there's so much mass in front of your face, moving around with any speed, I think, would be a problem. At least it was for me. In fact, I think it weighs more than and I haven't weighed it with the phone and the headset more than the HTC Vive, which is one of the heaviest VR headsets out there. So that really is the main detractor, and also that there is no developer kit as of yet. But they say there will be one, so I will keep my eyes out for it. But again, way too heavy, way too bulky, and kind of a clumsy installation design from my perspective. Okay, that's about it on this one. Let's move on to the next item. And here we go. Let me go ahead and turn this off first. And again, that's the other thing that I don't like about it. Once you put it in here, you have no access to the screen. So you have to constantly pull it in and out once you have it set up and unplug it. So and as you notice, I wasn't able to get it up and running because it's still stuck on that screen. And does advise you to pull it out and try and get it to work. You don't even have access to the power button, so you literally have to remove the whole unit out, which I thought a little disappointing. I again really like the mirror design versus this. Okay, give me a moment to figure out how to open this up. There we go. Obviously, kids will be smarter than me. Okay, so I still can't use it. But again, I did have it up and running. But I tried it several times and it was kind of a hit and miss. And so you better give yourself a little bit of time to get it up and running. Okay, so this works. Now, some people couldn't even get it to work with the Pixel 2, so they must have corrected problems with that. I'll turn off the power on this thing. Doesn't make that sound. I did that. And on the little globe. All right, let's move on to the next item. So if you're interested in AR, and since there's really nothing out there, or I should say AR projection systems, there are some available on, let's see, are we up there yet? Amazon. So I did a search, and you can probably do an eBay search as well as a few other sites. But there's a couple out there. There's this Dew Cooler, which basically seems very similar to the Lenovo in design. The phone sits up here and then projects down, as you can see in here. Actually, the phone fits in front here, so you have more weight in front of you. And then it projects into a prism and then into a semi-mirrored, what do you want to call it, cowl. There is another design very similar to that. That's right here. This is see, they've got some images. But you have to hold the device. So to me, what is the advantage of this over just holding your phone in front of you with a AR core? And the other thing is because you're reflecting the screen, you don't have access to the rear camera. And we're going to get to that in the development section of why I feel that's a huge problem. And I have some ideas on how to correct that, but I think probably the most effective way is to build sensors specifically for the purpose instead of using a single mono SLAM system. And there are a lot of articles on why that's not good. Here they show it. You have your screen into a half mirror, and then they show external camera for tracking, and then camera for tracking. But notice that I guess in this case, yeah, you project into a mirror, it's still facing forward. So that's a unique design. But then you have the problems of projecting. And as you can see there, it sits way out there and for it to work. So I think that's an issue. The advantage, though, is your camera sits over on the right-hand side of it. And that's a positive because then your rear-facing camera is available. And that means you can have a somewhat similar experience as a HoloLens, but this is bulky. It obviously has no straps. So, and the fact is that your phone is sitting up high, as you can see in this. I don't think that's very ergonomic. But again, having the rear camera available can give you a very simple, low cost system. Other than it's $36.99. So it's not a low end product, and it's made out of um, cardboard. But it is an intriguing design. I don't know if it requires, yeah, and here they actually grab something from the Magic Leap system, which I don't know if they would appreciate. But I don't know. I know that in some of these others, like the Mirror Prism, you have to match the optics or the optical distortion of the mirrored surface in order for it to appear correctly. That could be a problem. But if you've got $36 and you want to experiment with it, go for it. And as mentioned, there is another product out there, but it works more like the Lenovo system, and that's this one here. Put the phone in front. But again, notice you put the phone in front, the rear camera is facing out, and then the screen is facing in through a prism system and projected in front of your eyes. So, but again, this one's a little bit more expensive at 52, whereas the version that I have been looking at, this one here, which is the Mirror Prism, faces the screen out, which doesn't have access to. So there's disadvantages and advantages to each of these systems. In my opinion, they're both. All right. Sorry about that. I'm back again. So essentially, it's bulky. You slip your phone into it, but if you look at the screen, notice he's also looking up instead of. I don't think. I think that was just pushed in front of his head. I don't think he's actually wearing it. But the object behind this is, and I think there's a couple of other designs out there that uses something similar. You have this cowl that fits in front here, and that's where you actually see the object. And there's been a couple of different types of devices that do something similar like this, but this is about $50. Again, the camera is facing outwards, so you could do with what I've done with AirKit and Acore, create a stereo projected image. Again, because it's using a cowl and a prism, you're going to have to ensure your shaders um, look correctly, and also more importantly, they have to be mirrored, as well as you have to reverse your tracking system. So it's not just throw it in there and you can immediately go to work. There's some other features that have to be changed as well. So that's what's available on Amazon. The one that I am working on, which I think is more like the Prism, and then also because I want to use an external tracking device, which I'll jump to my screen. Mm, Is this one. So I'm working with a company out of China, and essentially you have a very similar system. You have a slot that the phone goes in. So I'll actually put this in, and I'll actually bring up a demo if I still have it up and running. Yeah, I may not have it anymore. We'll see. If I do have it, it should come up. No, sadly, I do not. But I'll just put it in here and show you. So essentially, you put the phone in here like that, slides in, and there's plastic on the back to kind of push it up against the frame. And then it projects into the semi mirrored finish. And then it has a band, and then you place it on your head. So, like the Mirror Prism, you see the projected screen in front of you. There are shaders to distort the screen so that they appear normal in front of you. And I found that the shaders weren't the best, so I'd have to tweak those a little bit. But having a this type of sensor, which I'm not going to disclose right now who the company is, but my whole goal is to take this out and integrate it into the top frame here and essentially provide a similar stereo tracking solution. And I have a couple of other things that I'm looking at too through a sensor that's external from the actual phone screen and cameras, and then allows a dual, uh, what they call slam camera solution versus just a single. So that will give a more positive tracking experience. And I'd like to say like the Lenovo, but I didn't find the tracking as good there. So this actually the headset itself should be reasonably priced if I can keep my price down on it. So the whole combo unit is pretty cool. And then I find even because they kind of, I don't know if you can see it, there's a bluish tint. So even though your environment in front of you is a little bit darker, it does help keep the object. Like I have a white screen and it's pretty opaque. So let me see if I can find that demo real quick. And also it makes it's very easy to put in and out, which I really like. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. And as far as developing for it, these mixed reality systems, as long as you have a black background and stereo paired with the proper shader for whatever your projection system is, that's all you need. And it's very easy to create objects and animations. And then, like the mirror also has a controller system. It really seems to work pretty well. All right, let me look really close here. I think the problem is that I have a couple of other options in here and I've kind of messed things up. All right, well, I don't have it anymore. I did have a demo using it, but I removed it. Okay, so with that being said, so this is my little sneak preview. Hopefully in a month or two, I will have an Android solution and I will announce that a little bit later. And then if you're very interested in mixed reality using the bridge system and you don't have or don't want to buy an iPhone 10 or because they do now provide a bridge headset for it, I do have one for the plus screens, and this one is actually a 7 plus. This is my own design. This is a NEODiVR Stel, and essentially it's an open frame device, very similar to my Dream Treader for the Daydream headsets. But I have a mount system for their sensor as well as their wide angle lens. I have calibrated it. In their previous versions, it was all specific to the smaller 6, 7, 8 screens. And I found that the actual IPD, interpupillary distance, was fixed and it didn't provide a good stereo. If you're using Unity, you have more control over it. But if you're interested in that, give me a shout out at info@allthings3d.net and I will send you the STLs. I thought about making them completely available, but I kind of held back because I may still be able to find a partner that is willing to push this into injection molding. I really like the design because one, it's open, and especially with uh, my Pixel phone, it never heats up, and that was one of the major complaints that some people have with the Daydream headset. And also, I have access to all the buttons, so it's my preference. But if you want that, just let me know, and I will send you the STLs for that. Okay, well, that's about it as far as the mixed reality headsets or AR projection. Lots of names going out there for that, but let's kind of look at the software end of that. And there's a lot of options on are moving into the direction of providing mixed reality solutions. And let's kind of look at the first one, which is Unity. One, because I'm familiar with Unity, But also, Unity has built-in solutions or packages for a number. So the first thing is download it. I would recommend getting whatever the version is that is the, what do you want to call it, the standard version. Don't go with the beta unless you have the hard drive space to go ahead and load two. I do that. But I have found that if you don't have the hard drive space, stick with just the regular version. The beta version has some fixes sometimes for a lot of the stuff that I experiment with, so I always have that as well. So it's your choice, but some of these things do actually require the standard version, and in the case of Euphoria, you actually have to have a patch. Okay, so after that, why do I want to talk about Vuforia? They've kind of been at the foundation even before Google. And now they actually have something called Vuforia Fusion that's available that works with AR Core. But gee, they're going through this kind of quick. So let's jump back to it real quick. So one of the things that I thought was very interesting and I started experimenting with is the Vuforia ground plane. And I do actually have a demo and what it allowed me to do, because this is set up and I think I can actually launch on my remote desktop system uh, a version that I had worked on so that you can see it. But with Vuforia, you can set up in their options there stereo camera projection or through camera projection. And that allows, and I think I'll just go ahead, and since I still have my screen, I think I may have to bring it up. Um, let's see. I'll bring up my Vuforia example. Okay. And okay. All right. So as you can see there, I can do that. I have the surface plane, and I don't want to go into the light. We'll see what happens. It's a large character. It's my Vince character. But notice I've got dual stereo um, screens here, and I can modify the lenses. And actually, what did I do? I actually took the information from my lens design for my system and embedded it in this. So if you have your own Daydream system or whatever equivalent, you can just put your own lens design into Foria. The problem is because it's not a Daydream compatible system, you're kind of limited on whatever you set up for this to work with. But it does give you paired viewed stereo screens, very similar to the bridge system, but only working with horizontal planes. So I'm going to go ahead and tap. So there you go. On my desktop now is Vince. And notice that I can move closer and away from him and around him. And if I put this up or in my headset, I can see a blended stereo pair to give it a very solid with a single two-dimensional camera output. So I mean, obviously it's okay. If you notice, it's not a full screen, but I found that the experience is pretty decent. And the fact is, it's free as long as you have a headset. So you can do something very similar to the bridge system. The only difference is that you don't have access to creating a depth map based upon a very crude model of your environment. So you're basically limited to planes. And I found the plane detection system uh, not to be as stable as I would have liked. And again, you know, I don't know if that's because it's not matched to my camera here. I've noticed that some other solutions out there have a camera calibration system, or if you've already been playing with A core or AR core, it's not as stable as that now. And now with version one of AR core now available with horizontal and vertical planes and maybe something in between, we may see some even better rock solid functionality. The problem is I have not been able to get AR Core unless I create a hybrid camera system, which doesn't take advantage of the AR Core. Well, I guess it could, But it doesn't take advantage of Viforia's split screen, and so I wasn't able to create something like this for mixed reality or virtual reality using the latest plugin or package for AR Core for Unity. So if you've seen some of the examples out there, sadly they do not work. So hopefully I'll have a new conclude or system out there. So there you go, and I can move around, put this in front of my eyes, put vents wherever I want, and walk around them. So it's a pretty neat experience, and you can obviously do a lot more than my little experiment here. But that's one of the reasons I was looking at Viforia. The other thing is Viforia has the option of working with front and rear cameras. So for a projection system, which is why I looked into it, it's kind of nice. Now the problem is um, working with the projection system or working with Viforia, you require a license, and I think if it's less than 10,000 downloads, you're okay. But if you go any higher than that, there is a cost to it. Uh, there is a let's see if I can log into mine. Oh, there we go. I should be able to log in. So you set up, there we go. So you set up your login information. Here we have, it's called Vince Projection. So I got a key, I input it into Unity, and I'm not going to go through the details. The directions are fairly self-explanatory and detailed enough that I shouldn't have to run through that. And then you can create target managers, which I wanted to try because I thought that might actually be better than plane detection, especially so it'd be kind of like a target that you could create, put it on the floor, and then you can place the object on it. However, it can be cumbersome, and I think with AR Core and AR Kits, stability with their plane and vertical plane, I don't think it's necessary as much, but I do see some uses for markers if you have a large area that you have to track, and it could be kind of used as an assistant. And I have been toying with that with the Microsoft Mixed Reality VR system to clarify which one it is. All right, so enough for Viforia. Let's go on to another one that has been around, but they've just added some new tools, and something that I'm very interested that I'll talk about is AR Toolkit. And you can download it and sign up for it. And they do have AR Toolkit version 6 coming out. And what that allows you to do is basically a lot of the same things that you can do with AR Core. I am not sure. That's not good. So I'm not familiar if I apologize for that. I had a distraction on my side machine that I'm going to be working with here in a minute. But so what's nice about this is, and this, as I was looking through this, because I've been doing some research, especially if you go out to GitHub, is that it has the ability, I'll show it to you when I get into the Unity demo, to work with stereo camera pairs. Now, they only talk about one, but essentially anything that combines streams for dual cameras can be used with it. And at least that's what they say. I don't know how easy that would be. And I know that there's some very low cost dual stereo camera systems. And if that's true, that I would be able to use that for projection, that would be a very interesting way to move forward with this. So we'll see. Okay, so that's about it about the tools I'm going to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to my screen. Windows machine. I'll tell you where you can turn
You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
You do need an iOS or some Mac OS-based machine, so just do everything there. The versions of Unity are almost identical on both, so that shouldn't be an issue. But if you're working on both platforms, just by yourself, Did I have got, I think I've got a $500 and it's already a few years old. What is it? A Mac Mini, and hopefully they'll build a newer version. And then I also have just a Mac Air, lowest cost solutions. Or if you're like me and you have a little bit of hardware savviness, just make yourself a Hackintosh, buy one of the low end systems so that you have a license. And then you can beef up the Hackintosh with a faster processor and the GPU, especially NVIDIA, since for whatever reason Apple does not work with NVIDIA. And I have done a couple of things with that. But sadly, the VR side of Apple is nowhere near where the Windows side is. Okay, so I've launched so I'm going to go ahead and bring up the MR example here that they have. So essentially what you have, and this is what you see in the screen in Unity, and I'll go through it real quick. They work now. I thought I had read that they no longer need the Google VR SDK, yet these demos seem to still require it. If you go to the main camera, you have your reticle, but it uses the GVR system to provide the dual cameras. And yes, cameras are still used. And then obviously you have some objects here that I'm clicking on. And then the bridge engine scene, which is something that they actually captured so that you can experiment with it. So I'm going to hit the play button. I don't know what will happen. So we'll see. Yeah, it probably failed. Why? Because I'm not on an iOS or a Mac OS system. So from my experience previously in working with it, once you have this all set up, you have and essentially they have, like many Unity, you can go into your prefabs, and there are certain prefabs available for objects. There are, they have the scenes which we're playing with right now. What else do we have? There's some more prefabs for the bridge controller. And the bridge controller is another 3 degrees of freedom device. Where's it at? Theirs is white right here. So that's built in so that you can use that to point at objects, and it works fairly well. Very similar to what you're seeing with some of these other solutions. And then here's the Google VR system. And I don't know what version they're using, but again, I'm pretty sure that you don't require this now. So if that's the case, essentially you drag a camera in and you're pretty much ready to go. And here's your main camera. And then if you're using an iOS, you probably will get better results than what I've gotten here. But it would look kind of like that. And these objects could be placed on whatever the mesh information is. Now, keep in mind, this is a demo, and that probably is removed. Actually, it is removed when you actually run this particular app on your phone. And again, try out the Bridget example first before attempting this, but it works very similar to that. And they have a couple of other demos as well. So let's see. Let's go to our scenes. Here's a VR example. And essentially, again, using the tracking system, but using it for VR. So you have 6 degrees of freedom, inside out tracking using their structure sensor. And this is something that I've worked with for several years with them, and it works pretty well. Again, though, it's at $300, or if you buy their $399 package, you get the sensor with it as well as the headset. Or if you have a sensor already, contact me and I can provide you the STLs to make your own NEODiVR uh, stealth device if you've got a Plus phone, and you'll be able to use that as well. So there you go. I haven't done much with it, but you just essentially go to Assets, XR, excuse me, Import. Oh, sorry, let's get to the import package, custom package. I already have them all laid out here, and just find the bridge beta. Now, again, it's in beta, so you'd have to sign up for the beta, and I'm pretty sure that you have to have an actual bridge headset in order to use it. So it's not just out there in the public. But it also has controllers, and you can then point at them and make them do things, which is one of the strengths of the bridge system, and it's all available in Unity. If you're more familiar with SceneKit, they do have a wide set of tools available for that as well. Okay, so that's enough there. Let's jump back in and load a project from one of the other engines. Okay, the Mirror Prism, again, is an iOS. Now, what's interesting is that they also have so there is our Mirror Prism. I've already loaded a demo. Then you have your main camera. And I don't know if you notice, one of the things that I don't see one here is like your input manager, your OpenVR. There are scripts that are involved with this, your Unity, and some people have had some issues. Notice there's also Google VR input here. And then if you go down into the prefabs, here's your inputs, dummies. What did I find? Yeah, actually, it was part of a script they have. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, not finding it right away. Here we go, shaders. So there's a couple of shaders that are made in order to reproduce if you can see in the right hand corner here, the dual stereo images, because the lenses, I'll actually take it off. As you can see here, are semi-reflective, but they're also curved, and that provides the magnification, because again, you have to make sure that what you see through that is focused, otherwise it would be blurry. But because of the magnification, we have to make sure that we take away that distortion, and that's what these shaders do. However, the shaders, which I guess is a good thing, are done and added through scripts. If you notice, there's only a single camera here with a dual output. And due to that, that's because then I don't see it here. But if we click on that, yeah, we have a compiling error. The other thing is I've noticed that some of these systems don't keep up with the latest Unity, even the latest versions. So make sure when you are trying to work with the plugins or the packages that you match whatever build of Unity with whatever their most current or updated version that's identified in the package itself. Otherwise, it will ask you to compile them, and then you don't always get good results from that. Okay, again, the version here, I would again suggest, because it's only made for iPhone, to do this on Mac OS instead of Windows. So that's about it. There's a couple of examples there. I've had a couple that worked fine, but some people have complained that the latest version they've had some hiccups with. So make sure that if you are a developer or want to work with this, that you go out to their forum and see what the latest information is. All right, so let's look at Vuforia. I'm going to bring up one of my older systems. Well, let's bring up this one. This might actually have my information for the other headset that I'm working with. And this should show you how they're working with it. Okay, so here's your. So this particular company um, and I've actually put him in there, has shaders as well. And their shaders are a little more obvious. So let me find them. And the problem with having shaders, there we go. Nope, that's double-sided. So you have a camera left and right, and these are set up so that they provide the proper distortion for your left and right eyes. And again, let me show you what this one looks like. Very similar to the geez, now I've already forgotten, the Prism. Um, it actually has a little bit more curvature than those, and you have to actually obviously unmap or undistort it in order for it to look proper. That's what these shaders do. I found with the legacy systems that have cameras that are part of, well, like for instance, you just add a script here to add the cameras, but this is a problem that I couldn't fix trying to use AR Core. And the reason for that is that these particular shaders need to go on two cameras. And because AR Core, as well as Google VR, as well as Daydream, are now all embedded in Unity, you don't have access directly to those cameras. Now, if you go through and modify some of the scripts, you can probably tweak that. But as it stands, it's a much more difficult, which is why you still see people using the legacy Google VR packages, because they were still using separate cameras that you could assign shaders to. And so that is something that I will have some examples later on. The other thing is, because the screen is facing out with this particular design, you don't have the ability of using the rear projection, and it's not noted if they're planning in a later version of AR Core to use the front camera. I hope they do, but if they don't, there are some ways to get around that that I've been thinking of. But sadly, I like both of these designs because they fit closer to the head and they're more comfortable than these that put the phone up here in order to continue to use the rear facing camera. And also my designs, I'm looking at using rear projection, which I'll get to in a second. And I'll show you what will be possible. And that is the AR Toolkit demo. As soon as it loads. No, that didn't work. Okay, so I've loaded AR kit or AR toolkit. And here's your scene root. There are obviously a bunch of examples, but something that I thought was noteworthy is this stereo optical scene. So you have a left and right camera, and then you have the marker. So let's take a look at it when we launch it. And there you can set up the cameras. And there's an error because I don't actually have cameras. And then we can look at another stereo scene. Again, left and right cameras. And then another stream format. So essentially, it's taken information from left and right cameras from the stream that's coming in. So if I plugged in a USB camera here, I would be able to take that information and use that for detecting planes and depth information so that I could use it for positional tracking. I have not played with that yet, but as you can see, there are several cameras out there that are less than $100 that are capable of providing dual streams. I don't know exactly, and actually, they recommend some that are far more expensive than that. And then there's some in between. So with having that kind of feature built directly into the Unity plugin, I'm very excited about that because that means I'll be able to create a scene and provide positional tracking with maybe an off-the-shelf dual stereo camera system. So looking forward to that. So there we go. I think that's about it. If you're not familiar with the AR core system, I think I'll load that real quick. I just loaded this today, the newest version. Um, if you have been using the beta version, it should have already updated, but you can download AR Core, the SDK, directly to your phones now from the Play Store, so you don't have to sideload it. And you can load this for Unity. Some things, if you're interested in this, is the first person camera is shown here. Then you have this example controller, and they make it somewhat a little bit confusing versus, let's say, ARKit. They build a controller, and the controller is a script that has the assignment of object. So here they have something called Andy, which if we go in there, I don't know if this will run. Yeah, it fails too. But Andy is I think part of the reason, well, I won't get into that, but Andy's the little android. And you can see that when you go into, well, you can see it in the, here's Andy. There he is. You can see him off in the bottom corner there. And one of the things that I mentioned that I was going to talk about, this is what they call a shadow blob. And if you notice, a lot of the objects in AR just have blobs. They're not dynamic. And one of the reasons for that is Unity does not have a shader that adds shadows to a, what would you call it, a clear surface or one with 100% transparency. So you don't just get the shadows. However, I have found a shader that I'm working with that if you're interested in, again, info at allthings3d.net, and I will send you a link to it. But the shader is dynamic, which means it will be lit by or provide shadows from anything. So what I have done with my own stuff before I found this is that I light my scene and then I capture the shadows on a plane and then bring that into something else, remove the opaqueness of the plane so it's transparent. So it's a lot of work. Then I bring the plane back in as a material, and then that applies the shadow. The problem with that is if you change your light in your scene, it will modify, or that obviously will change your shadows, and then you have to go through that whole process again. With a dynamic shader, anytime you change your lights in your scene, let's say if you use a spotlight or something, it will automatically change the shadows depending on where you changed it. Now, this does not um, provide directional observation of the external world to provide shadows. I have some ideas on how to do that, but right now, the only thing that you have within the AR Core kit, let's see, is this environment light, which is a script that measures the environment light outside and then applies that to whatever light that you have in here. In this case, all they have is a directional light. So it will modify the light of that directional light based upon what it senses in the environment light. And it seems pretty automatic. You just drop it in, and unlike ARKit, where you have to drop it in whatever light you're working with. So it's pretty straightforward, works, but again, it only changes the overall brightness of the scene. I have some ideas again of how to do that, but again, it would require a setup. It wouldn't be dynamic. And the reason for that is the camera is only facing in one direction. So you would have to basically move the camera around to get a full hemisphere of information and then determine the brightness depending on where you're at and then apply that back into the scene. So it's a lot more difficult challenge, but I think somebody will probably figure that out and have something available. But if all you're wanting to do is have a dynamic shader, contact me, info@allthings3d.net, and I'll send you a link and how to obtain it. Okay, that's about it. Why did I show AR Core? Because I still think this, especially if you create dual camera shaders, might be the solution if you want to create something like Vuforia. And if you're interested in knowing more about Vuforia, I'll go ahead and bring that up real quick. You go to Build Settings, and actually I'll show this on any of these, and you want to go ahead and modify something, you have to go to your XR settings. If you want to do virtual reality, you check it, and then you check on or determine what device you want to work with. Here I have the Oculus, but you should go in and hit the plus sign. And then, as you can see, there's multiple devices, a mock HMD headset designed for Vive so that you can simulate what the experience is going to look like without actually having an HTC Vive. But you would actually use the I don't even seem to have it. Excuse me. Hmm. What did I do wrong? It looks a little different to me, so I don't even know what I've done. So the newer version has an actual option that shows Daydream as well as Cardboard. I don't know why it's gone here. Maybe it's because I had this set up for Vuforia. Oh, and that quite might well be because this is, remember I mentioned earlier, this is actually a patch to the version of, I don't know this. This is a patch for Vuforia, and it may have actually eliminated some of the features to do Daydream or Google VR. So you might want to make sure before you start using Vuforia and the patches, which was necessary and for it to work with the Pixel XL phone, that you have another version of this, which I have not loaded. So you could have multiple versions of Unity, and that can be confusing. All right, so I wanted to show you about Vuforia. If you check down here, Vuforia Augmented Reality, um, now these options will be available to you, but you also have to make sure that you have the Vuforia library. And I'm trying to remember, I think all you need to do is go to the store. Yeah, actually, I have them already installed here. And once it's installed, you have these options here. And it's really easy to set up. I'm just going to go ahead and bring one in. If you want to bring in AR camera, you click on that. We will import the assets. And the AR camera is all dependent upon what type of tracking you want to do. Okay, so I have it here, but I'm going to go ahead and remove it. I want to bring it in again. Well, I'll bring it in. So there it is. And then you bring in some other objects. Which is your ground plane. Actually, we didn't want it there. We want it outside of that. And then you also bring in plane finder. So your ground plane stage is where you set up all your objects on. And let's see, I should have a prefab where I've done all this already. So let me see if I can find it. And let's do this. Let's open up one that I've already worked on before. So essentially to recap, make sure you select the Vuforia in your setup and then make sure all the assets are loaded in. If you want to do plane detection, you need to load those in and assign your object to it, and that's about it. And then it should determine that. And if you use the plane finder, it creates a little cube. I thought it was too small, so I expanded mine. And then it should look like what I showed you in the stereo. And then let me bring it up. No, it's the wrong scene. Um, all right, so let's see if we got something here. Okay, so this is just a cube that I was working on. Okay, and this is for, yeah, so this is not what I want. Hmm. Guess I would, yeah, let's try this. Shouldn't be long, except it won't launch, so. Okay, so here we go. I should have just stuck with what I had. All right, because this still has Vuforia loaded into it. So if we go to one of my earlier demos, which I have here, so let's look at the Vuforia stereo. Okay. So there's my little Vince character with animation. Notice where he shows up, and that was a problem, but we should be able to play. Yeah, he doesn't actually. But the cool thing is you go into build settings and choose whatever. Let's say I wanted to do stereo camera, but I'm going to get out of this and I'm going to show you the features. Okay, so there's my ground plane, AR camera. Here we go. I'll talk up. So you open up this, and then if you look on the right-hand side, it gives you a lot of features. And one of them is you can identify the phone and viewer. You can identify viewer type, and you can actually select basically your lens distortion and add that in there, which I already did for the NEODiVR Stealth. I actually created a special one for it. I added my license, but it's the plane and viewer that creates the actual stereo image. So when I finally created it, it would look like this, which I've already shown once, but I'll go ahead and bring it up again. And then there he is. Let me put him right here. So that's the plane detection. So if we go back to my screen, plane stage here, cylinder right here, inside
You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Shadow for that. And then this is the plane finder, and that plane finder has a shader that allows you to see what we see here. Underneath, see the little square there, and that allows you, and that's something I noticed too, it just after a while kind of disappears completely. None of this seems to work always correctly. Okay, so let's see, bring it back up. Okay, so there he is. And if you did this on the floor, he's about 5'6", and then you can walk around him. And as mentioned, because it's stereo, you can put it up to your eyes. Now you can create a version with just a single screen, just like A-Core, but I found that the horizontal planes didn't work as well as the A-Core solution. But sadly, it's not as versatile as the Vuforia. So I guess there's pluses and minuses to everything. But Vuforia is built into Unity, and let me jump back to it. Just need to go back
You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
I actually created a build to use the front camera, which didn't work out so well. Let's see if this works now. No, still nothing. Oh well. So there you go. So you would build it, make sure you have the proper Android library set up on your machine beforehand. Again, Unity has some good instructions on that. And you build it, and then you'll be able to play around with it. As mentioned, the Vuforia does seem to work if you have the patch, which you see there. I do have the patch. With Pixel phones and a few other Android phones. Before that, just with the standard Unity build, it did not work. So make sure you get the patch installed. Once you do that, it works, but it does appear the patch also breaks its use in other things. So you may have to have two versions if you want to experiment with multiple mixed reality plugins. So again, to recap, I looked at, and I'll jump back to my other screen. So give me a moment. Looked at the bridge system. Well, actually start out with a HoloLens, which is the most expensive and pricey. And actually, I should show that. Oh, I'm not there yet. So if you wanted to work with the HoloLens, with Unity, it's fairly easy. You just go back in, make sure that you're using the Windows platform right here. And then you go to your player settings. And then if you go down here, Yeah. So again, I think the problem is going to be I'm not using the right version. But if you use the standard version, there actually is a HoloLens option. You just select that. There's a couple of other things, so just make sure that you go through and select the proper settings in order to do HoloLens. And then make sure you have Visual Studio, which sadly is required, and then you can build things and put them into the Windows Store. It's fairly straightforward. It was a little cumbersome at first, but it's a little bit better since then. But again, because I'm using this patched version, some of the features that would be there when you go into XR settings are not. Like I said, there's a HoloLens. When you select virtual, there we go. There's your Windows Mixed Reality. So that is there. But I'd also remember I thought there was a HoloLens feature as well. And then we could add other things. So there are obviously a lot of different options that can be provided depending on which platform you're working with. And like, if we're going to go back to Android, you can use the Vuforia selection if you're using Vuforia. If you're not, as you notice, I went to AR core support. It told me, hey, you can't do that. And I did find out something else too. I was getting a crash because I had AR core selected. And what else did I try to do? Oh, Daydream selected. Didn't like using those two together. And I constantly got crashes. Not within, I didn't get any errors in the console. I just got them when I actually tried to launch the phone. So that was kind of disappointing. And also, as it just shows, our AR core cannot work with Foria. So if you're wanting to do for some type of VR experience with positional tracking with AR core, like some people have done, you're going to have to come up with your own dual camera solution in order for that to work and still have access to the camera that's needed by AR core. So it's a little tricky, and some people have developed special scripts for that. So you just have to do a little search on that. Okay, well, I think that's about it. So I'll go back to my internet screen. So we covered a little bit about HoloLens, the bridge system from Occipital, only for iOS, the Mirror Prism, which is not available yet, but will be. I think it's a nice little system for $100. Again, only available for the iPhone 6, 6S, 7, and 8. And then, even though it's an interesting idea, this Lenovo system here, what do they call it? The Lenovo, I keep forgetting the name. Uh, it's funny how they don't even bring it up in some of this information here. Well, the Lenovo System Mirage AR headset is bulky and heavy, as I showed earlier on in this video. The tracking system seems very interesting, the fact that it has dual cameras, but it does not outweigh the fact that it seems very heavy. And in fact, it's not only heavy, but it's very front oriented. So if you move your head, the inertia causes it not to stay in place, which could be a problem, especially when you're doing something like this. Plus, I also felt the range of projected augmented reality was very narrow, more like the HoloLens. So for $300, not so much worth it. Maybe at 100, just so you can get a cool lightsaber. Oh well. And again, the lightsaber only shows up in the AR experience. So if you want some other things to play around with, there's this Dew Cooler for $52, plastic, where you put your phone in. Back camera is still available, and then it projects down into like a semi-mirrored cowl. I have not tried one yet. Again, you're going to have the problem with it sitting up high, so your center of gravity is going to be kind of weird. And then there's the cardboard version, which we looked at. A little more reasonable. Again, you put your card, but again, it's cardboard. And because of where the phone sits and there is no straps, I don't see this being a very interesting option other than using your phone like we do now, where you have the screen looking at you and you see objects out there. But if you want to experiment with something, I will probably buy one just to play around with it. Um, because one, but for $36 for some cardboard really makes me wonder a little bit. And that's about it. There really isn't any other solutions. You can go out to Alibaba or Alibaba Express, but they're also running about 30 to $50 for the system that I've got. And again, there and also with the Chinese versions like this, there isn't really any true um, SDK. There's a few little things. I think the one that I'm working with has a little bit of a Unity SDK with it package, but again, it's only the shaders, which I showed earlier. Some of the other features, like the mirror prism, you have a controller that's not available. So it's very raw, and you basically get what you paid for. But I think it's still a nice design, and I plan to improve it and actually create a full 6 degrees of freedom inside out tracking system with it. And we'll see where that goes. Okay, well, I think that's about it. I want to bring up one more item. If you've been following my other post, I had written an article, especially after the Florida shootings, and I want to go ahead and bring it up now. And I call it "Is 3D Technology Creating the Perfect Murder Machine?" You're welcome to read it. There will be links in the show notes, or the show notes for this YouTube video. But actually, since I have been covering 3D technology for some time, I'm somewhat fearful, not somewhat, I am fearful that, and from some of the videos I've seen on Vice and elsewhere, you know, we we have the equipment now to pretty much fabricate, scan, and visualize now with VR, the ability to essentially create some very horrific weapons or add-ons to some of these weapons and train in simulations before even applying these. So in a sadistic man woman's mind, to in order to move forward with it, I think we're really providing the no pun intended, the ammunition for some really disastrous settings in the future. And again, because I have talked about 3D having so many pluses in engineering, architectural, medicine, and even education, it would be sad to see some regulations put here. But when you call your actual CNC mill the Ghost Gunner 2, and you talk about the guy who's behind this, about, in fact, if you go out to their website, which I'll go to right now, he's got a banner, or did he take it down already? There it is, telling you how many days you got if you're in California before you can't buy this anymore. And I think for good reason. We don't need this in order to buy this and a lower receiver so that you can drill it out, because it's only 80% CNC'd, in order to create a unmarked assault rifle. I don't see any logic in that. And again, maybe I'm a little more left than others, but I truly don't think, especially since there is so much good to be done with 3D. And I don't want one of these devices to be behind the next mass shooting. The next thing you know, we're going to have regulations that overcompensate on what we see. And so I think it's time now that we look at some of these things and look at the people behind them and call them out, boycott them, or just bring it to people's attention. There is no reason for this. And the sad thing is, it's a very reason. Like, if you click on the shop now, it's $1,675. That is great for a CNC. And again, I think it's only a 2-axis, but for a lot of things, that's all you need it for. And the fact is that it's available. It's, it looks like some of the older 3D printers, that is pretty good. And here they show some of the jigs that are made specifically so that you could hold particular weapons. And here they show the lower receiver. I mean, literally ridiculous price. So you buy this, and he provides the CNC I think Gerber files, if I remember correctly, for these, so that you don't have to do anything except plug it in your computer and run the application and put this jig in place as well as the receiver, and it immediately moves forward with, yeah, the AR-15 jig set. So you buy these two together, go in, I just the thoughts of why people would do this, just I don't understand it. And so I'm hoping that my attention to this does things. I'm also very concerned with, you know, VR has a lot of great ideas and purposes. I talk about it all the time. In fact, I think for what I want to do with it is bring Vincent van Gogh to life so that you feel like you're part of a time and era that he was involved with. I think is a great use for it. But really, do we need another violent uh, first person type shooter that you're shooting people that are simulated to be real? I mean, obviously, there is still a disconnect, but from my own experience in VR, it is much different than looking at a flat panel LCD screen and a keyboard and mouse. And the fact that you have a company like this company that creates the VR 15, which is VR Arsenal, um, and I've covered this earlier on some of my other podcasts, is just incredulous. I mean, why do we want to do this? Why do we want to create such realistic environments in VR? So what? That what's the purpose? I don't know. Is this the only form of entertainment some people have? Uh, don't know. It kind of boggles my mind. Maybe I'm just an old fogey now, and maybe I should just go away. But really, why do I need this? I mean, it's bad enough that I can just use my game controller and feel like I'm shooting a weapon. But to have something that actually mimics the weight, recoil, in fact, they even tout that this thing has a weighted trigger to give it an identical feeling. So I'm personally not for this, and I know that there's other solutions. I saw one in an early VR meetup in Portland, and the guy was from Texas who moved out to Portland. So I'm not a fan of this, and really concerned with it. And the other thing is, I don't even need to buy one of these weapons. If you go to my post, I literally have all the files to create my own, including a mount for the HTC Vive tracker. So I don't even need to buy one. I could make one if I wanted to because I have the fabrication tools. So really concerned about this. Read my article. You know, I might, like, again, be an older fogey on this, a little more left leaning, but I really am concerned where this might be going. And maybe now's the time to start talking about it instead of after the. Well, another technical glitch. That's the problem. I updated everything except my streaming mixing software, and that has already crashed 4 times. Luckily, I save all of my content now, and so I'm able to bring it up quickly. But I should have updated that as well. But I wanted to cut some time to ensure that I started the episode on time. So if I got cut off before I finished, take a look at my article. The link will be in the show notes. Again, I don't really want to be called chicken little out of this, but I really am concerned where some of this technology is heading. Some of the articles and videos I've seen about using 3D technology, and I just don't want to see another incident occur. And we need to be talking about all of it. How the violence in VR, the use of 3D equipment to create, weapons that can shoot repeated rounds, fabricating assault rifle components, and so forth. I'm really against using 3D technology for that. It doesn't need a black eye from it. It does so much good in so many other areas. So make sure that's something we talk about. If you're a proponent of 3D, we don't need to have a black eye from people who, uh, for obvious reason, feel that kind of stuff is fun. And then obviously, hate to use Trump's term wacko, because with my wife being a psychotherapist, he really wasn't mentally ill, but there obviously was a lot of anger issues and other things. And I have seen other people that are very close to the edge, and we don't need to give them the tools to go over the edge and create another incident. So I'm pretty strong expressing my feelings in there. So I won't say any more. Read my article, look at the other stuff, weigh in. If you're a fan of 3D technology, fan of, as I call it, VAXR, virtual augmented mixed reality, let's keep it safe. Let's keep it interesting and exciting. And thank you again for taking the time to watch this. And I don't know when I'll be back. I'm trying to set this up when I've got something really important to talk about. So I'll probably see you in another month. So until then, enjoy that month, and I'll see you again. Bye.